Hi friends, today's topic is Keynesian theory of employment. That according to this John Keynes, he has said in General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money in 1936, that is in 1936, he has proved that his theory was effective. But during 1930, there was a Great Depression occurred. Great Depression occurred. So during this period, there was unemployment occurred, recession was taken place, and as a result of which, he has came into the limelight and he gave his Keynesian theory of employment. So according to Keynesian theory of employment, that way the level of employment depends upon national income and output, and his theory is a short run analysis. Okay, this theory is based on short run analysis. Then according to, if you go to the classical theory, the classical economist uh, believed that there is a full employment in the economy. There is no unemployment, and say supply is equal to demand. That supply creates its own demand. There is no overproduction and no unemployment in the economy. But Keynes has proved as this is wrong, that during 1930s there was a Great Depression that has taken, as a result of which what is happening, there was a unemployment was there. So there was a supply is greater than demand that time. So as a result of which what happened is that there is a unemployment. So the classical theory of unemployment and assume that is always a full employment equilibrium in the economy. But J.M. Keynes has been criticized this theory and explained his employment theory in his book in the year 1936, that is called as a General Theory of Employment, Interest and Money. So this is about the introduction part of the classical Keynesian theory of employment. Now, this Keynesian theory of employment, where the level of employment, the level of employment depends on national income. So, what is national income? That is nothing but the total value of the the total the total value of goods and services produced in a year is called as a national income. So the national income is an important element. So the level of employment depends on what? National income. So that is why N stands for employment is a function of national income. If suppose that means if suppose if uh, if 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 national income if sorry if national income increases, then employment also increases, and if national income falls, then employment also false. So there is a direct relationship between the national income and employment. So this is the important element, you have to understand it. So before going to that, we are Now that it's based on assumptions that it's a short-run analysis and it is based on effective demand. So Keynesian theory has used in a short run against the long run. So it is theory is based on the short run analysis. So why there is according to him there why there is a unemployment in the economy is due to lack of sufficient total demand is the cause for the unemployment. So he has introduced this concept effective demand. And what is effective demand? Effective demand is equal to aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply. So it is a point of equilibrium where aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply. That is called as a uh, that is called as a effective demand according to Keynes. Right. Then now we'll discuss about the assumptions. So it is based on short-run analysis and technology is constant, where capital and size of population is constant, efficiency of labor is constant, the amount of capital used is unchanged. So based on these assumptions, let us repeat what are the assumptions. That is, it is a short run analysis and your technology remains constant, then efficiency of labor is constant, then amount of capital capital used is constant. So based on these assumptions, mm, the Keynesian theory has been functioning. So now let us discuss in detail. So have you understood that the Keynes theory has been given? Keynesian theory was developed in 1936 when before there was a Great Depression in 1930. So as a result of Keynesian theory was performed. Then let us discuss with the aggregate demand price. Aggregate demand price refers to the expected income from the point of view of the entrepreneur. That means it is the expected income that he must receive from the sale of output. So increase in effective demand leads to increase in the level of employment. So aggregate demand refers to the expected income from the point of view of the entrepreneur. Then what is aggregate demand function? Aggregate demand function is nothing but the total demand for all the commodities produced at a particular level of employment. So aggregate demand function and aggregate demand price. So what is aggregate demand schedule? It refers to the showing the table aggregate demand price at different levels of level of employment is called as aggregate demand schedule. Now, what are the two components of aggregate demand? One is the consumption demand, and next one the investment demand. So these are the two components of aggregate demand. Now consumption demand, that means if the suppose there is 100 workers are there in a one industry and they are producing suppose 400 units of production, and and industrialist or entrepreneur thinks that by spending 100 workers on the firm and they are producing 500 units of production, and entrepreneur thinks and or industrial thinks that he'll get 1 lakh rupees from the sale of output of this production. So this is nothing but expected income from the point of view of the entrepreneur. That is called as the aggregate demand. So it is the expected income. So this is called as a aggregate demand. And aggregate demand function, where we have the total demand of the commodities produced at different levels of employment. That shows the aggregate uh, demand function. Now let us look at the schedule. This is a schedule where the employment is increasing, aggregate demand price also increasing. So aggregate demand price, already we know that it is the expected income from the sale of output. So if they are employed from 10 labor, 10 lakhs, okay, 10 lakh in of employment, then 11 the labors has been increased, employment labors are increasing. So this expected income from the sale of output is 600, 625, 650 and so on. So up to 16 labors the his expected income is going on increasing. So this is called as expected income. This is aggregate demand price. Yes. Then coming to the next one, we have the aggregate demand curve. When we plot this table showing the aggregate demand price on a graph, we get the aggregate demand curve. So aggregate demand curve sloping upwards from left to right. So on x-axis we are taking employment, on y-axis we are taking aggregate demand. So aggregate demand starts from the not just from the origin. Why? Because as there's no increase in the as you increase in the labor force, when you're increasing the labor force only, the output starts increasing. So that is why the labor starts from the this point level. So aggregate demand sloping upwards from left to right. Then coming to the aggregate supply. What is aggregate supply? Aggregate supply refers to the total supply for all the commodities produced by the entrepreneurs at a particular level of employment. So the aggregate supply is nothing but we have cost of production plus profits. Yeah. Whereas in aggregate demand, it's only just cost of production. So aggregate supply is the total supply of money that all organizations in the economy should receive from the sale of output produced. So it is the cost of production of goods and services at a particular level of employment. So it is the total amount of money paid by the organization at different levels of production. So aggregate supply is nothing but the minimum income that the entrepreneur must receive. That is called as a must receive. That is the main point in aggregate supply price. So aggregate supply price shows the entrepreneur must receive income, the minimum income to that in order to retain that cost of production. So you must receive that. That is called as the aggregate supply price. So it is a sale of from the output. He gets whatever he gets the money. That is called as the income. That is called as aggregate supply price. Then aggregate demand function. Aggregate supply function shows that aggregate supply price at different levels of employment. So it shows aggregate supply price at different levels of employment. That is nothing but aggregate supply function. So we have aggregate supply price, and aggregate supply function. Aggregate supply price means that it refers to the minimum income that the entrepreneur must receive from the sale of output. So that is, it includes cost of production and aggregate. We already know that aggregate supply is a short-run and a short-run concept because the technology, size of population, raw materials are remained constant. So in order to increase the level of employment, we have to increase the aggregate demand according to James Keynes. So in the above schedule, it is seen in the level of employment and also increasing, ASP also increasing. So this is the expected income and this is the minimum income we must receive. So 10 lakhs of employment labors, that is showing the 600 is expected and minimum income is 500, right? And in the 11, when 11 workers, 11,000 lakhs of employees are employed, his expected income increased to 625 and must receive is 550. So this is consists only the cost of production, and this is cost of production plus profits. So this is aggregate supply aggregate demand price and aggregate supply price. At one point where aggregate demand price is equal to aggregate supply price. So this point is called as a equilibrium point. So according to Keynes, this is called as a effective demand. What is this called? Effective demand. So at this point where expected income is equal to must receive income, that is the aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply. This is called as the equilibrium point. Then at last we can see that effective demand here, real national income is measured on an x-axis and aggregate demand and aggregate supply on y-axis at E1 where aggregate demand is equal to aggregate supply. This is a point of equilibrium where effective demand is taking place, but it is still in called as a underemployment. It's not a full employment. To increase the full employment, Keynes suggested to increase the aggregate demand where consumption plus investment plus government expenditure. The government must play government interference is a must to increase the full employment, to achieve full employment. So that is the effective demand. E2 is where increase in the full employment can be achieved. In between E2 S and E2 there is a deficiency in demand. That is there's a gap that is called as an inflationary gap. That means then aggregate demand is increasing. That leads to increasing the price level. That is nothing but the price aggregate inflation takes place. So at point S, you can say that there is a full employment in the economy, where at point S, to achieve this full employment, what we need? Government interference is must. So it's in order to achieve the full employment in the economy. Okay, thank you for watching.